Hey guys, welcome back to the garden. I'm Bree if you are new here. Today I'm going to show you what my garden is currently looking like in the month of June. I give you guys a tour every single month to show you how everything is really changing and evolving, and let me tell you, the space is really changing and evolving. If you pause this video and simply jump back to the May garden tour, I started it pretty much in the exact same spot. So you'll be able to see within seconds just how much the space has really grown within a 4-week time span. It's also really going through quite the transition at the moment. I harvested garlic a few days ago and I'm about to replant these beds out. I was going to do it today, but then I kind of slipped in. So I'm going to do it tomorrow morning because I also have to do a little bit of harvesting because we might actually be having 4 open beds as we speak, which I will explain here a little bit later on. But the garden is really transitioning from spring to summer right now. And even though it's booming with life, we also have some empty space that we get to play around with. So let me go ahead and just jump right in. All right, so let's go ahead and start in the very front like we have been. So you may notice that my door is now green. I'm obsessed with it. I'm even more obsessed with it than I was a few weeks ago when I painted it with you guys. I love it. I love that it's a fun pop of color, but yet it's still neutral. And then come winter when there's no green in the space, my little heart will be so happy to see that little bit of green. It blends in so nicely. And again, it's just so fun. I love it. But here in the front, we got a lot going on. There's been so many things blooming and I'm so excited about this. So first off, here's the elephant in the room, this beautiful Goldie sunflower. I keep getting asked about this like crazy. So this was a volunteer sunflower and it is doing so well. This will actually bloom probably a good 5 weeks sooner than any other Goldie I've had in my garden in the past. Since it was a volunteer, it's way ahead of any other sunflower in the garden. So one reason why I love these sunflowers is they have a ton of branches. These will bloom for about 6 to 8 weeks versus your big huge head sunflowers. They will do one big sunflower head and then they die back, which I do have throughout the garden. But these Goldies, you can harvest them, you can use them as cut flower, and they will continuously bloom for, again, 6 to 8 weeks. They might not look as hot toward the end, but they're one of my absolute favorite flowers. And this one's going to be blooming probably within the next, I would say maximum 2 weeks. We're starting to get a really nice little flower head up top. All these little ones are getting heads, so I wouldn't be shocked if I saw some yellow poking out next week, but I'm really excited about that. Then we have so many things up front here. My nasturtiums are doing so great. My little drum flowers are about to open up and start blooming. And then one thing I did this year that is new to the garden was I ordered the orangey lime zinnia series. I'm obsessed with this. So I have 4 up here alone and they all look different, but yet they're all the same seed. I love how they all look different, but yet they all blend. I think this is going to make such a beautiful bouquet. One of them, like this one here, is almost more of that orangey lime with like a touch of like peach and orange. This one over here is more orangey and peachy. This one right here is like almost more green, and this one's more yellow. Love it. I'm obsessed with it. Then we also have my calendula, which my calendula is doing really good. I've been harvesting this like crazy. My plan for the calendula is to have enough dried blooms that I can do a calendula oil that I can turn into a salve. So calendula salve is really good for any type of burns, sunburns. I burn myself in the kitchen all the time. Just really good, nourishing for your skin. And lastly, in this very front section here, we have my chamomile, which is actually starting to die back, which doesn't surprise me really because it started to die back around that time last year. But then we have some straw flowers start to bloom and my little beautiful tomato plants. So these are my little bumblebees. And I have to say, my tomato plants this year just look so beautiful. We will go around all of them, but I was going back and forth to my garden tours around this time from last year. And if you have watched for a while now, you will know my starts last year were massive and they were also really big the year before. My tomato starts going out were a few feet tall, and this year I did not let them get bigger than about this. So these are some of the tomatoes I will actually be planting out tomorrow in one of the garden beds that I harvested the garlic from. And I think this has made such a difference. They weren't stressed inside. They were pretty happy plants. So once they came out here, they were able to thrive. I think that's made a huge difference this year because my tomatoes look so good. But I will say we've had a pretty mild last 4 weeks as far as temperature goes. It's been in like that Goldilocks condition zone where we're like low to mid 80s, and we've been getting on and off rain. So the plants have been really able to thrive on their own without me doing a lot. But I will say the one thing this year going into this garden was I did a soil test to figure out where my nutrients were in my pH. My pH was high. I lowered my pH a bit, and I also had to add some nitrogen to the soil. And this was something I've never done in the previous 5 years. And I keep swearing that this soil test has just made such a difference with how the garden is currently looking. I know we're about to approach like a super like heat cycle. And whenever those heat cycles come, things can really start to just go crazy. But right now, I'm just really impressed by this space. All right, so on this opposite side, we have all of my peppers, and the peppers are doing pretty good. There was a few that I had to replant that I had going downstairs, which was fine. I wanted to have a few more jalapeno starts. Unfortunately, jalapenos this year and me, we have not been the best of friends. I've had the hardest time this year with jalapenos for some reason. Not so much other plants. The jalapenos I have planted over here look beautiful, but I planted out so many, and I've just had really crappy luck this year with germination for some reason when it comes to jalapenos. As far as all my other ones though, doing really well. I have paprikas over here and bell peppers, jalapenos, serranos, and then a ton of cayennes, and my cayennes look so gorgeous. I'm so excited about them. Honestly, some of these peppers are probably going to start turning pretty soon. I'm so impressed on the size of some of these paprika peppers. To be honest, they look so plump and beautiful. I make my own paprika powder. And also this year, I still have so many cayenne chili flakes from my like red pepper flakes that I think what I might do this year is cut out the seeds and try to actually powder out a bunch of cayennes and do cayenne powder outside of the seeds instead of doing more of like a flake. So I'm really excited to play around with that. One thing I did differently this year versus the last few is I only planted out 4 bell pepper plants because for some reason in the previous few years I've had really crappy luck with bell peppers, and then this year it just jumped to jalapenos. But I had really good beginner's luck with bell peppers, so I was like, you know what, I'm not going to devote a whole garden bed to bell peppers again this year until I know or figure out what I potentially was doing wrong. I think, again, a lot of it probably was a whole nutrient thing when it came to soil and me not really knowing correct things. But again, I had some really good beginner's luck. So I'll be really interested to see how everything pepper related goes this year. But so far, everything's looking really good. Also, I got an elderberry plant, which I'm really excited about. So this elderberry is called Instant Karma. Loved the name. Okay, so me and my husband were at the plant nursery and I was like, oh, is that an elderberry plant? And it was. So I do need to get the corresponding other elderberry to make sure I get fruit off of this. I wouldn't get any type of elderberry soonest until next fall. So my plan for my elderberry is actually to plant it off in a corner I have over there where it gets some good sun, but it's not super sunny. I think it'll do pretty well over there, but it needs a black beauty, or I don't know, there's 3 different ones it corresponds with to cross like pollinate where everything will get pollinated correctly. So I'm learning more about like the whole fruit trees, because you also have to do that with apples and a few other things, which I found really interesting that I actually did not know until this year. So yeah, really excited about my elderberry plant though. If we ever move, this thing is coming with me. As we move on, this is probably one of my favorite little spots at the moment, like visually, of the garden. I just love this little angle of the chicken coop. You can see the echinacea and the yarrow. You got the A-frame trellis, the bird bath, which was also new. I added a few weeks ago when I painted the door. It's been lovely. I love the bird bath. Either way though, let's go over all the stuff over here. So this is my Rica blueberry plant. It's been starting to ripen and put on berries. I actually will probably go through and harvest off these little berries. I've been trying to save enough. I really want to make just blueberry scones out of the berries I have. I obviously won't get that many. I believe this is like a 6-year plant. Blueberries take a really long time. You really don't get much off of one plant. I honestly probably need like a minimum of 5 to 10 if I really wanted to do anything with blueberries. And I only have this one, and it's in a pot. That's also a question I get often. I did it in a pot because the soil really needs to be acidic, and I had no other way of making sure that that stayed acidic and nothing else went super acidic, so I did it in a pot. I would love to transplant this out possibly in that corner over here as well, where I'm thinking about putting all of the elderberry. geez, what I just talked about over in that corner there. I think it'd be really nice if I could put a few more blueberries or something over there. Over here, I also have some dill that is starting to go to seed. I love the little dill heads. These look beautiful in any type of just bouquet if you make them at home, especially when they get yellow and actually start to form the seed. I don't really like dill or the smell of dill, but I use it for pickling for my husband's pickles and everything. But I love the little, I think these remind me of fireworks. That's what I was gonna say. I have some straw flower, oregano, some more zinnias, more calendula, and yeah, I just kind of repeat the pattern as we go down there. Currently in the strawberries, we pretty much are done with our first round of strawberries. These will really start to probably produce here in another month or two time span. These are everbearing, so I will get another harvest out of them. But I do need to go through, and you can see how I have a bunch of these runners just starting to hang off. I need to go through, prune off some runners. I would like to go ahead and prune off some of the ones that are already rooting in soil and actually put those inside under lights and let them grow and really mature, and then plant them out probably like toward fall or so. But then we are getting into our onions, our San Marzanos, onions and San Marzanos on that side, and also a whole other bed of onions. So let's get you guys a close up here. So these onions are looking so good. These might be the best onions I've ever grown yet. We are probably already at the best onions I've ever grown yet. Currently, with all the sizes, we have some really awesome onions throughout here. Like, look at this one. And these probably honestly have another 3 to 4 weeks. Probably another 3 or 4 weeks. I believe I plan to harvest these beginning to mid-July, and they're starting to get there. There's one of my red ones. I didn't do a lot of red ones, but you guys can see here, beautiful. One thing I've been doing that you might be able to tell is I've been technically spooning the onion, which is where you go through and just kind of remove some of the soil around the base. You don't want to go too far with this. You don't want to touch any roots or expose anything, but I had a lot of mulch on here from that winter time of planting them out early. So I actually pushed back all the mulch, and I've just been running my finger around every beginning of the week, and I kind of just remove some of that extra soil so there's no tension, and that's actually supposed to apparently make your bulb continue to grow bigger, which makes sense to me. If I was like resisted, like had anything resisting me, I'd probably be a little bit more opt to not grow as big. So that's something I've been doing. It's something I did last year too, but last year was just an epic fail with onions altogether. So I will say, when it comes to my onions, I have this bed, and this bed here. This bed here has been fighting with crabgrass from the very beginning. I have an issue with crabgrass around here that if I'm not on top of it constantly, it will spread really fast. We have a lot of crabgrass around here, unfortunately, and if it gets in one bed like it did that year, like it kind of went overwhelming last year. I didn't realize how bad it got until fall, and at that point it really spread, and I thought I got a lot of it removed, but apparently I didn't. But I am noticing that the onions right over here on this small section, like this little probably 2x4 section, they're smaller than any of the other ones that I'm currently growing. And it's because the crabgrass issue is all right here. And if you know anything about onions, they don't like to fight with their roots. They have really shallow roots, so you really don't want them fighting for any type of nutrients or space. And they really don't like that. You really got to keep up on weeding when it comes to onions and like garlic and things like that. Really interesting to see that though, knowing what I know. I hate crabgrass. It's like my worst enemy. Oh, I also have a sunflower here, various little drumstick flowers that I didn't mention. Also have my San Marzanos over here, and they look so good. I'm actually getting beautiful clusters of fruit, where in previous years I was so envious of so many people where they would show their tomatoes and they would have these beautiful clusters of tomatoes, and I would have like 4 out of my 8 actually produce a tomato, and it wouldn't be this beautiful little cluster. But as I showed you guys with my cherries too, it made a huge difference. I don't know what's going on this year with my tomatoes, but I'm getting these beautiful clusters of fruit on all of my plants, and they look so beautiful, and I couldn't be happier. And as of this morning, the loofahs are touching, and this trellis is going absolutely insane. I think this trellis might be more beautiful than last year's trellis with how the way things are going. I am blown away by the loofah first and foremost. So I have what, 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, I have 4 5, 6. I already have 6 loofahs the size of that. When, if you jump back to the May garden tour, these plants were like to here. They were maybe like 2.5, 3 feet tall. I told you guys, once these things take, they were going to take. And then you watch, come July, this plant is going to be insane. So I have 2 loofahs right here. If we keep going back, I have honey nut squash right here. And I'm actually starting to get some little baby honey nut squashes as well. Then we go to watermelon, which I'm also starting to get little baby watermelons. The one thing that hasn't grown as much as some of the other plants is my cantaloupe. But last year cantaloupe was a little slower going as well because I did have it on this side. And on this side of the trellis here, the fence actually cast a little bit of a shadow at one point of like midday. So I've always had better luck with things growing a little bit faster on this side versus this side. But what's interesting to me is the cucumbers are just going insane right now. I have little babies. I will probably have to harvest cucumbers next week. I'm about to be swimming in cucumbers. I'm going to have to pickle a lot. So yeah, here is the cucumbers. The cucumbers are doing just absolutely insane. They look so good. I'm going to be, again, swimming in cucumbers really soon. I have so many flowers. The bees are going absolutely crazy for these cucumbers. One thing I've been doing with this trellis that I did not do last year is I've been a little bit more diligent on pruning off some of the suckers or like outshoot plants, just to make sure that this doesn't get too bushy. I did plant some greenhouse varieties, and I do know the loofah does really well when it just goes ahead and expands and all that. But I honestly don't want this to get too overwhelmed with foliage to where I have really sucky airflow once we get to the heat of the summer. So that's one reason why I also heavily planted these cucumbers a little bit closer. So I don't want them to branch off and just continue to put off their outshoot plants, because I have done that one year and my trellis was insane. It looked beautiful, but I do know that like once it hits a certain point, there's a lot of humidity, a lot of disease can pop on really fast. So that was something I've been doing a little bit differently, and so far I really like it. I like how I can see the individual plant. It's still really foliagey, which is one reason I love growing vining crops, but I also think it's just going to help tame some of that disease. Over here I also have some okra planted. I did have to reseed this okra though, so that one's a little bit behind, but overall this will start to explode as well. Okra, once it gets going, it grows really fast. I always feel like I forget about these 4 pots right here. They're behind my strawberry cage. So I have some culinary sage, nothing crazy, just some basic sage. I also have some peppermint over here that I use a lot for tea and mojitos. I've got some more dill. So pretty. Then I also have another calendula plant that has only bloomed once so far, but as you can see, that'll probably be open tomorrow. Then we have my carrot bed, which I did in 2 separate sessions so far. These carrots are really starting to take. So this was the first year I did any type of pelleted seed, and I am so impressed so far. I didn't have to do any type of thinning. I was really able to lay out the seed where I wanted it really easy. They're spaced out really nice. So hopefully I actually get good carrots this year. This bed is really starting to germinate. You can see all of the little ones along the line right there. Those are itty bitty carrots. Really have to make sure you keep the area pretty moist when you're trying to germinate carrots. I watered this morning, but I honestly might water that one more time before I go in for tonight. Okay, so now potatoes. I honestly feel like I am just swimming in a sea of potatoes. They are just going so crazy. The last time I saw you guys, I don't even know if they were flowering yet, but they have flowered, and now a lot of the flowers have actually completely died back. I have a few more plants that are hanging on to maybe like 1 or 2, and they're in this bed here. I originally told you guys that this bed initially seemed like it was going to be about 2 to 3 weeks behind, and I will say it's really caught up with the whole timing of the flowering and everything. So I'll be really curious to see how everything really dies back. But this was the one bed where I cut my seed potatoes, and this was the bed where I didn't cut my seed potatoes. I do have a few small gaps where it looks like the potato actually didn't produce anything, but I'll be really interested to see the difference between the two and how much they produce. So far they're doing really great. This was a Kennebec potato, if I didn't say that in the very beginning. The Kennebec is actually supposed to be a blight resistant potato, and that was one reason why I got it, because I had issues with potato blight last year. And so far, as you can see, these potatoes look so beautiful. I think last year, either around this week or the week after, maybe 2 weeks from now, was when I had to actually harvest my potatoes early because I got potato blight and I didn't want the blight to be introduced to anything else in the garden. So I'll be really interested. So far, I've never been successful with potatoes, but this looks promising to me. So on the opposite side of the potatoes, I have this garden bed here, which is a bunch of different sunflowers, which are really starting to take, which I'm excited about. But you also see the 3 garden beds I talked about where they are now empty, because this is where the garlic was. So the garlic actually got harvested about 5 days to 7 days prior to the last 2 years, which honestly wasn't too surprising. We had a really warm winter. And one thing I mentioned toward the end of that video that I wish I would have done just slightly different this year was actually start feeding the garlic a little bit earlier. So the garlic actually started to grow about 2 to 3 weeks earlier than it did in previous years, because in February we typically get really cold and we really didn't have that big of a cold snap this year. So the garlic really got a head start, and I probably should have started to hit it with nitrogen in the very beginning. So one thing I do with my garlic is I start to feed it with blood meal in the very beginning to give it nitrogen, and then I turn around and do bone meal toward the end to give it a phosphorus boost to help with that bulb development. I stop feeding once I see scapes, about a 4 to 6 week time span toward the end, and that was what I did, but I almost wish I would have hit it a little bit sooner with that nitrogen to get that green growth going. But I was honestly worried that we were just going to get a cold snap and I didn't want it to die back after it getting all that new growth and everything. But that's one thing I will do a little bit differently if we have similar conditions to last year. Either way though, if you haven't seen the video, I am so happy with my garlic harvest this year. This was the first year that I didn't use any seed garlic that I bought. I used all my own seed, and I was really impressed with the outcome. I was a little bit nervous, which was something I didn't mention until last week's video when I harvested the garlic, or a few days ago. I think this is maybe out like 4 days ago at this point. But I was really nervous just because I haven't done that yet and I didn't know the outcome, and then everything started to grow and then die back sooner, and I was like, this seems a little early. So I was worried that I wasn't going to have like really beautiful garlic, but I ended up getting really pretty garlic, so I was really happy about it. Okay, so now we have my in-ground space when it comes to tomatoes, and this is where a lot of my determinants are. I do actually have 4 more San Morzanos here on my A-frame trellis, and I can't wait for this to fill out. I think it's going to be so beautiful once it does. But I have a bunch of determinants. I have 20 determinants in this space, and I am loving the varieties that I chose this year. So in previous years, I've just done basic Romas, but this year I did the Supremo and the Plum Regal. And so far, these Plum Regals are a little bit behind the Supremos. The Supremos are producing, and they are putting on so many flowers. They're supposed to be a high producing Roma variety. I do grow all paste varieties outside of the cherry. I don't know if you recognize that or not, because I'm not a big fresh tomato eater. I actually really enjoy doing a lot of sauce, salsa, canning tomatoes, and all of that, which is what I do a lot of my with my tomatoes. I do enjoy a tomato out of my garden though. So I was actually telling my brother-in-law how I don't really like eating tomatoes outside of my garden because they just suck, because he was talking about strawberries and I gave him one of my strawberries and he's like, that's actually good. It doesn't taste like water. Exactly. I honestly was never a fan of tomatoes until I grew my own, and I don't like tomatoes unless they are my own, but I do only grow paste varieties. I'm not a big fan of like a big juicy watery beefsteak. I like a lot of dense flavor when it comes to it, and that's where I get a lot of my paste from. But overall, the Supremo is looking phenomenal. I do really like how the Plum Regals are starting to form. They're getting a lot of flowers as of now, but these Supremos are definitely ahead of the Plum Regals for sure. But again, overall, all the tomatoes are looking really, really good, and I'm really, really happy. One thing that happened last year with the tomatoes is we got a really awesome first wave of like all of these ones that flowered around now, but then we got so hot come July and August that a lot of the tomatoes dropped their blooms and they just weren't producing, and I had a really crappy like second half of the summer when it came to things. So we will see how things go. I really hope this is a redemption year, because that's one of those things that you learn with gardening, is you will have some really good seasons of some things and you'll have some really crappy ones of some others. And last year for me, beans and tomatoes were some of my crappiest out of my 5 years prior. So I'm really hoping I can get some good green beans. So one thing I didn't mention with the garlic beds, with them being empty, is I'm actually planting another round of tomatoes that I mentioned earlier with some basil, a few other Goldie honey bears, and then I'm doing 2 full beds of green beans. So 2 of these beds will actually be successioned 3 times. They will have 3 separate plantings. They will have garlic, green beans, and then they will turn around and they will be some of my first beds planted out for my fall garden, which will probably be broccoli and cabbage. So those beds are going to be really heavy. They're right in my sunniest area as well, and that was planned for a reason. That way, even come winter, it'll be really sunny. One thing with this area right here when it comes to my tomatoes is my tree right here actually shades this out during like peak sun. So they do get a little bit of a break from that daytime, but it didn't seem to help much last year, to be honest. So let's actually give you guys a closer look over here, because like these Supremos are just insane. Like look at these little clusters of fruit everywhere. They are just producing insane, like so many flowers and so many fruits so far. I'm highly impressed. Honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if these ones here started to blush within a few weeks. I have to say, this little area here is probably one of my favorites in the garden. So this little wildflower patch is something I have not done since the very beginning years of me gardening. And I don't know why, because I absolutely love just how beautiful and organic it is. I love poppies. Okay, so this is the first year I've ever grown poppies. I've never had poppies in a mix, and I've never grown poppies. I love them. I will say they have a really quick turnaround as far as bloom goes. They bloom and then within like a few days they completely die back, but the bees love them. This whole area has been swarming with bees. There's been a ton of ladybugs in this area. I've been seeing a ton of green lacewings, just a ton of beneficial insects, and I love it. I think this space is just super cute. This is one of those areas though that is about to go through quite the dramatic change. I have all my cool weather crops here behind me. I do have a few cabbages that are heading up, so we'll see how far they get. I have pulled a few because they did start to show signs of bolting, and I have originally planted most of the cabbage for the chickens. I didn't plan to ferment any of them this year. I might ferment some come winter time, like for fall and winter, but this whole summer crop was going to be for the chickens regardless. But I am, ooh, I see another ladybug. Okay, but I am going to have to harvest my broccoli as of tomorrow. So I do want to give you guys a closer look at the broccoli, because this is the longest I've actually had broccoli in my garden. I've never got to June in the garden. I think by beginning of May, mid-May, I think in previous years by mid-May, most of my broccoli has bolted at that point. So let's give you guys a little bit of a closer look. So the cabbage is here. Here's my little cabbage head. It is nice and strong. We'll see. It's getting kind of late for that, honestly. And this area has been shading out really well, and that was one reason why I put the broccoli here. And I honestly think in years to come, I will be doing the same plan, because this worked out really well. So you can see this head right here is pretty much perfect. It's showing signs of getting a little bit lighter green, and that's when you really want to go ahead and get to it. This is the one that showed me concerns. You can see there is actually yellow poking out. This will affect your flavor a little bit. I'm not too concerned. Again, I'm harvesting it tomorrow, but you can see how all the heads are starting to not be as conformed in a head like this one is. You're starting to have a little bit of branching out. That is showing signs that it's about to start to really flower. So I need to go ahead and harvest all the broccoli. So again, some of these heads look so beautiful, and I'm not complaining at all. These are some of the biggest broccolis I've ever grown. I've never had broccoli in my garden this long. Broccoli and your lettuce, your cabbage, all your cool weather crops are going to be best harvested in the morning when they have that coolness in the soil and throughout the night. So that was when I didn't see this until like 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock when I came to check on all the eggs for the chickens. Honestly, I've totally spaced that was going to be a thing I was going to do this morning, and I was going to wake up early and I was going to harvest it, and I completely forgot. It is a little bit too long, but honestly, I'm not too mad about it. It's going to taste and eat just fine. I'm not worried about it. All right, guys, well, that's going to conclude June's garden tour. I hope you enjoyed seeing a more detailed version of the garden this week. Honestly, just wait for July. If you're not subscribed, make sure you're subscribed, because July in this garden is honestly one of my favorites. There's going to be so much change too. I honestly don't know if these onions will still be here at that point or not. The trellis will probably be going insane. We'll probably have a whole like trellis tunnel at that point, and there's going to be so much harvesting at that point. So I cannot wait to show you guys what July is looking like. Make sure you're subscribed if you're not already, and I will see you guys all in the next video. Thanks for watching today. Bye, guys.